So welcome everybody to the Energy Changemakers live stream. I'm Elisa Wood. I'm the founder of Energy Changemakers. And as I said a few minutes ago, we are a platform that provides content and community for those working on the grid edge. And if this sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to subscribe to our free newsletter. The link is going to be in the chat. So we ran a story recently about a Western University study that identified places on the US grid where it makes economic sense to go off grid. And that story got a lot of attention. Last time I checked, it was the most read story on the site this year. So I am really happy to have with us today the two researchers, the authors of that paper from Western University, Ali Sadat and Joshua Pearce. And they are going to not only talk about research, but talk about apparently what they have found since then and also what's ahead. So Ali, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Elisa. So yeah, it's a great honor for me to present my study, and I would like to transit the presentation to Professor Pearce, so he would start. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody. It is an honor for be here. And we're going to talk a little bit about grid defection. So Ali, next slide, please. So I think most of you, or probably everybody on this call, is a little bit familiar with how the grid has operated in the past. And as the cost of distributed generation has gone down, whether we're talking about cogen or solar or even wind, that's changed how energy is going to be provided. The old model had large centralized electricity generation plants that kind of spiderwebbed out and provided service to everybody. And the model that utilities used for that is that they had to kind of guarantee power to everybody in their jurisdiction, and they used the kind of long leads, people living off in the wilderness, that would have been very expensive to provide electricity to. They were subsidized by kind of the major population centers. But as it's become less and less costly to generate your own electricity, their very own customers are threatening them by either offsetting some of their load or completely eliminating it. So we did a study in 2011, and I've been bouncing back and forth between the US and Canada basically since I've been an academic. And it was just as I was moving from Canada to the US for the first time back, we showed that in North America, both in Canada and in the US, photovoltaic power had finally reached grid parity. And what that meant is that you could generate electricity in your own home off a typical residential system for approximately the same price as the electricity you're buying it from the grid. It was very intriguing to see what happened with that result. So I literally published the study just as I moved across the border. And so it was the same study, it was the same person. I did a press release at both universities. In Canada, it made every single news source. Like I was on everything, every television show, every newspaper, everything. And in the US, I made the local paper for the university I was at, Michigan Tech, and I made the LA Times, and that was it. No one cared, or no one cared about the idea that solar was finally economic. So Ali, next slide. And so since 2011, the photovoltaic costs have continued to drop. They've been pushed down by about 90% in the last decade. The technologies have gotten far better. If any of you that have kind of maybe built your own system, 10 or 20 years ago, the inverters now, like we have smart inverters, we have smart maximum power point trackers. The solar panels themselves have gotten substantially more efficient, and all of that has pushed prices down. And then the other piece of it is that in the 10 years ago, let's say, you wouldn't even consider putting a battery on a PV system that was connected to the grid. It just made no sense whatsoever. Today, batteries in many locations make sense by themselves, let alone when you couple it with solar, because their costs have come down so far. And so what this means is that pretty much anywhere in the world now that gets a reasonable amount of sunlight, you can start to think about producing your own energy. So next slide, please. At the same time, because of aging infrastructure and just the cost of normal things increasing over time, and we've had a massive increase in demand as we start to electrify our transportation and more so electrifying homes. For example, in the last couple of years, in the US, heat pumps are now more popular than kind of conventional natural gas furnaces. Like all of these things are pushing a large amount of demand on a kind of a somewhat limited infrastructure, which is increasing prices. When you throw on the kind of normal stuff of inflation that we're all dealing with, you have the grid costs all going up while the renewable energy costs and distributed generation continue to drop. Next slide. And so you put all of this together, and it starts to represent a threat to people whose business model it is to encourage you to use more electricity so they can sell it to you if suddenly a substantive number of their consumers, of the people that they sell electricity to, are beginning to generate some on their own. And so it's just as bad as, say, getting high efficiency lighting in at your house. If you're starting to decrease the amount of electricity you're using, they're making less money. And in the, let's say a decade ago, we had what was called net metering. And although it was the law, it wasn't truly practiced. It was a very small fraction of the entire US actually had it. And the way net metering works is you generate electricity usually during the day, maybe more than you need, and that's fed onto the grid, and you get credits. And then at night, when your solar's not doing anything, you're pulling from the grid, and you can use those credits. And the optimal economic system that you would have for a net metered system would be something that generates just enough kilowatt hours over the year to cover your load. And so that's how most people size their systems. It was meant to kind of break even, because in general, utilities wouldn't pay you for the electricity as a small residential consumer, but it was just to break even. All over the US, we've been seeing a major change in how net metering is evolving. And so in most places, it's not true net metering. It doesn't allow you to, for example, carry credits from month to month or from year to year. It doesn't. And what's really changing is the compensation model. And so net metering was popular because it was relatively easy for everybody to understand. If you're paying, let's say, 12 cents per kilowatt hour, and you generate a kilowatt hour, that should be worth 12 cents. Now, there's time of use where the price of electricity radically changes, and depending on what time it is. And some of the most sophisticated net metering models also use that. But what we're seeing more and more is if you generate electricity, you get, let's say 5 cents. And when you go to buy the electricity, they're charging you 20 cents. And so that seems intrinsically unfair to consumers. And so if you've already invested a substantial amount of money in buying a large-scale photovoltaic system, it only stands to reason they might look for other alternatives. And so instead of getting the 5 cents of electricity that you're going to get from the grid, maybe it makes more sense for the consumer to push that into a battery and use it themselves. The next slide, please. And so that brings us to this concept of utility death spirals. There was a really nice report of this a few years ago from the Rocky Mountain Institute, where they looked at where might we see such a thing. And that the idea of a utility death spiral is if the utility discourages photovoltaic generators to stay on the grid by doing something like having that differential price between what you're providing and what you're paying, then people will leave the grid. And when they do, that increases the cost for everybody that remains on the grid. And then more people might say, well, now the differential, like the return on investment for investing in an off-grid system, makes even more sense. So I'm going to do it. And as more and more people do it, you get this thing where the prices continue to go up. And then, we feel sorry for the people that are left kind of holding the bag at the end. And so that's called a utility death spiral. And to the best of my knowledge, that has never happened in the US all the way through. But the concept is there, and it represents a real risk. And the reason that this is so timely now is that all of these factors are moving in. That if utility rates are maintained the same way they are now, or continue to kind of go this direction of separating that, getting a bigger and bigger delta between what the value of the electricity that the homeowner is providing and what they're paying for electricity, it puts utilities in this kind of risky territory. Next. And so to figure out how big of a threat this really is, Ali and I did a study using a software package that he just developed. And so I'll turn this over to Ali to explain.
Thank you so much, Professor Pearce, for his insightful comment to the challenges of the current energy transition. So my name is Seyyed Sadat, and I would like to discuss about the solution to the challenges that Professor Pearce discussed. So our proposed solution is to use hybrid energy systems. Why we need to use hybrid energy systems? Because we cannot solely rely on the solar energy technology, as we cannot generate electricity during the nighttime. So we need something like battery so that we can store the energy during the daytime and then use that energy during the nighttime. Or we need some backup options like backup generators. So whenever solar energy generation is not enough, then we can use that backup generator. So we propose to use hybrid energy systems, and this hybrid energy system would provide greener energy, and it would increase the reliability for energy systems. And also the cost would be reduced using the hybrid energy systems. And for some people which are interested, it would provide energy independence. So to have a hybrid energy system, we need to design it. And to design this hybrid energy system, we need a software or a tool. A sophisticated tool in the literature is Homer Pro, which is really famous. But at the FAST Research Group, we have developed and we designed a novel and new software called SAMA, Solar Alarm Multi-Objective Advisor. This software is a student-developed software which is a microgrid optimizer and can be used for designing hybrid energy systems. And the interesting point is that is as accurate as Homer Pro. And also it can provide more unique features compared to Homer Pro. So as a student developed software is as accurate as Homer Pro, and also it can have more new features compared to Homer. Like we can simulate electric vehicles, or we can adopt some machine learning features, and also we can simulate heat pumps. So the SAMA would be really helpful for optimal sizing of hybrid energy systems, and also off-grid system feasibility analysis. And also it can assess the grid defection potential assessment. So SAMA is specifically tailored to assess the grid defection potential, which using a Homer Pro is not easy to do that. So using SAMA, it would be really helpful for the engineers, researchers, and policymakers to design their own hybrid energy systems, and they can have their own sustainable energy systems. And I would like to say that SAMA is currently being developed as a web tool and Windows and Linux application. So you can see the first insights of the web tool that we are currently developing. And this web tool has two types of modules. The first module is a general calculator module, which is for normal audiences, which they have the limited technical knowledge, and they can easily design their own energy system. And also we have advanced module, which is useful for researchers, and it would require more technical knowledge so that they can have more accurate results. And also we are developing the Windows application here, which is really user-friendly. And as you can see, the insights here, it would require a step-by-step procedure to ask the user the input parameters. And I would like to remind a memory that I have here. So I was talking with a researcher from UK, and he was saying that working with Homer is so difficult. I needed to take 10 hours of webinar in YouTube to be able to work with Homer and simulate my hybrid energy system and get accurate results. And I said to him, hopefully with SAMA, you can do that easily. You don't need to spend that much time. At most, you would need just 1 hour of the webinar to be able to do the software and get the accurate result. So in addition to the accuracy, the being a user-friendly software is also another objective of our team. So the surprise here is that as a student-developed software, SAMA is completely free and open source. So you would have access to a software which is free and open source, and also would bring you more unique feature compared to Homer Pro, which is paid software. You need to pay for that thousands of dollars per year for that software, and also is a closed source. So we would try to release the software in next 6 months, and so soon to be you can access the web tool and the Windows version of the software. And I would like to discuss about interesting results that we have achieved using the SAMA. So at the current stage, we noticed that grid defection at some specific states location across the uses is economically feasible right now. So we categorize grid defection cases into two main categories: grid defection cases and marginal grid defection cases. What are the grid defection cases? Grid defection cases are the cases that the life cycle cost of the optimal system designed by SAMA is less than life cycle cost of the being only on the grid. So if you are in the San Diego or San Francisco, so having a system which is designed by SAMA would be more cost effective, would be more economic for you rather than being on the grid. And what are the marginal grid defection cases? These cases are the cases that the life cycle cost of the hybrid energy system designed by SAMA is almost same as life cycle cost of the being on the grid. So if you are in Los Angeles or Boston, and in the future utility companies in these cities are going to increase electricity prices just a little bit, or the price of the PV and battery technology is decreased, which is the current trend, then your cities can be also considered fully economic cases for the grid defection. So there are some main parameters which are promoting the grid defection. The first and foremost is that if you are in a solar-rich location, that can be considered a favorable parameter for grid defection. And another parameter is that if you are in a location which the electricity prices are expensive, then your location can be considered a favorable location for a grid defection. And these two parameters are tangled together. So totally, if you are in a city or a location which is solar rich, like San Diego in California, and then electricity prices are expensive, then your city, there is a great chance for that it's a favorable, fully economic grid defection case study. So totally, we have categorized the parameters that promote the grid defection. Then the first one is the geography. If you are in solar-rich location, and also another parameter, if there is any economic incentives for renewable energy systems, like at the current, we know that there is an investment tax credit for the renewable energy systems, and that investment tax credit is really helpful for the off-grid systems, and it promotes the grid defection. Another interesting things that I would like to discuss is the way that the rates are designed and the rate structures that are proposed by utilities. And these rates can also encourage people to defect from the grid. Utilities may not be aware about that the rates can encourage people to defect from them. But in our recent study, which is currently under review, we understand that defecting from the grid can be actually dependent on the rate structures that are proposed by the utilities. So utilities can design their rates in the way that discourage the people from being disconnecting from the grid. And the policies that offered by the policymakers are also important. So net metering scheme should be more fair. The compensation rate should be more fair. If the compensation rate for the net metering is not going to be fair, so the user would defect from the grid because it would be more economic for them with the current technological advances. With the current technological advances, using photovoltaic, solar energy system, and batteries would be more economic. So I think the policymakers and the utilities should think about that, and they should have more incentives for the people to be on the grid, to remain on the grid, with reducing the cost and investing more on the renewable energies. And inflation is another parameter which is affecting the grid defection. If inflation in the future is going to increase, then the price of electricity can be increased, and then the people with have more willingness to defect from the grid. And some people may have some environmental and social perspectives to defect from the grid. Some people would like to have more greener energy systems, so they can have hybrid renewable energy systems to be more environmental friendly, and some people would like to have energy independence. So because of that, they can have off-grid energy systems. For all of these purposes, SAMA can be helpful, or software designed at the FAST Research Group can be helpful for that. It could be helpful for the researchers, for the engineers and industry people, also for the policymakers to design the appropriate policies. So at the conclusion, defecting from the grid is not the easiest step. So there are some challenges on that, like the high initial capital costs, and there are some reliability concerns without proper backup systems. And also there is a risk of the death spirals from widespread defection. So totally utilities should try to balance the rate structures to retain the solar prosumers on the grid. And also they need to offer more incentives for the people to use hybrid renewable energy systems and offer more fair net metering compensation rate, as Professor Pearce mentioned. And the action item for them is that they have to proactively design strategies to encourage renewable energy adoption. And that should be their main goal. And if they are not going to do that, they would be in the main danger in the future. Thank you so much for your time and consideration. And if you have any question about our study or about the software, I would be more than happy to answer your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua and Ali. That was a great presentation, and as somebody said in the chat, really nice slides too. Great content, great slides. So let's open this up to questions. Since there's quite a few of us here, it might be a good idea to raise your hand.